Alright, so today's video is kind of lower quality. I screwed up some of my recording settings, but hopefully it's not too bad. Um, I successfully fight a Slicer and a Dramiel in my Hookbill in a 2v1. And I wanted to revisit this fight because I thought it was pretty good, and there were some mistakes made on their end. There were, not too many mistakes made on my end, and it was a great fight. So I'll just kick it off here. I have the Dramiel and the Slicer. They've been hanging out. I'm here in Mantinalt system. These guys have been hanging out for a little while, and I decide that I'm kind of interested in fighting them. One thing I want to note beforehand, I'm currently using faction ammunition, Caldari Navy Scourge rockets, rather than the Rage rockets I normally use. They're lower on paper DPS, but I pulled these rockets out of storage specifically because of the Dramiel I saw on D-Scan. Dramiel's speed tank, like they sig tank. The ship itself, the hull has a 30-meter sig radius, which is very, very, very low. So it gets difficult for them to. Uh, it's it's difficult for targets to apply their DPS. Between the 1700 meter a second speed of the Dramiel with a 1 MN afterburner and the sig radius, the Rage rockets apply about 60% of the DPS that faction rockets do. So that was just the sig tanking thing is just something I kind of knew offhand beforehand. I didn't do all the math. I just knew that it was going to be a problem, so I busted out these rockets and I decided to go to work. So, I undocked from the Citadel we have here. I warped to the small at 100, you can kind of see, to see if they were outside and if they were, to see how I could fight them. The Slicer is on the inside. I believe I readjust D-scan right here after I check the pilots out a little bit. But the Dramiel's just sitting there at 0, so I'm not really getting the fight I want yet. I could try burning. Considered burning to the Dramiel there, but he decided to slide the gate instead. So what I do here is that. So he slid the gate, which means they're both on the inside of the plex now, and that means that they get to dictate range during the fight, and I don't. I'm not really cool with that. So what I decide to do is I want to try to get them to come to me. So I pop open the probe launcher here, look at the outpost here, and I warp to the novice outpost at range. And the reason I do that is because if I can get them to warp to the novice thinking they can catch me on the gate or something, but they land there and they realize I'm a little ways off, maybe the slicer will burn at me. And with my overheated prop and my dual webs, I can catch a slicer pretty easily. So I can try to kill him before the Dramiel gets to me, and then maybe fight the Dramiel or run off, depending on what happens. So I land on the gate here, and I readjust my D-scan over here so that I can tell where they're at. I'm also, again, checking their history just to kind of see how old they are, see maybe with age comes experience. That it's kind of a coin toss, but I'm just checking that. So I'm watching D-scan. I sit here for a little while, waiting to see if they come to me, and nothing really happens. I sit here for a little bit. I eventually get bored, so I decide to go back to them. I figure if I slide the gate, if I slide into the plex that they're in, and I manage to heat my micro warp drive and burn in a direction, I can get off at least one cycle of the micro warp drive and pull a little bit of range from the brawler, the Dramiel that would presumably scram me, and use that time I have to try to catch the slicer. So I land out here. I preheat my micro warp drive in a second here. So, I'm just waiting on the slide. So slide in, and the first thing I want to look at when I get into the Plex is where they're actually positioned. Before I actually slid in, I thought that the Dramiel was going to be close to 0, so he could tackle me, and the Slicer would be kiting around. Well, it turns out to be the opposite. The Slicer's at 15 kilometers here, and the Dramiel's off at 57 kilometers, doing who knows what. So I decide I still want to kill the Slicer first. The Slicer is a paper thin, it's a paper thin ship. It's a kiting ship, but it still does a decent amount of damage. So if I can clear that off, then it's essentially just a 1v1 between myself and the Dramiel. So I heat my micro warp drive and my webs, and I burn straight at him here. Double click to approach. Right now. Okay, so I lied. I actually screwed that up and didn't heat my micro warp drive. But you'll notice that he is only moving at about 3 kilometers a second. I almost caught him with my webs there. He's at 14 kilometers away. Just wait a little bit. He chunks me with his lasers. I get the dual webs on him, and now I've got him scrammed, and now I start wailing on him with my rockets. Now this is as the Dramiel is burning at us at 4.5 kilometers a second, so he's a little fast. But so he'll be here soon for the fight. He's autocannon fit. They're usually autocannon fit, which means he's going to be like, brawling me down. But right now I'm just focused on getting rid of the Slicer. So because the Dramiel isn't really applying DPS yet, I actually stop my shield reps when I get into armor here, or as I get into armor, and I start cycling my armor reps again while I'm killing the Slicer. So the Slicer goes down. Now it's just myself versus the Dramiel. I managed to scram the Dramiel and I dual web him here. Maybe. Yes, there we go. Okay, and I dropped scram for a second for whatever reason. But one thing here, I'm gonna double back for a second. One thing you'll notice here, actually, I believe it's like right here. Watch my armor and watch my. So I make that, as I mentioned, I make that transition. I make that transition from my shield reps to my armor reps, but I actually screw that up. So and I waste 2 cycles on an 8-cycle ancillary armor repair. You'll see why. So I stop cycling the shield reps and I start cycling the armor reps. And I do that so that I start topping off my armor. But you see, I actually wasted like 3 full cycles there with the armor reps. So now I need it, but here we are now. So back to the fight. I'm fighting the Dramiel, and again, I circle back to application here. This right here, this up here, that was a single volley, I believe. Let's just watch that once more. Watch his shields get chunked. He gets down to like right here in armor, and then boom, just like that. So I'm hitting him hard, and because of that, I figure he's not doing he's doing damage to me, but Dramiels are usually armor rep fit to kind of so they speed tank, they sig tank, but in conjunction with that, they use an armor repper to kind of top off their armor as they take some damage. But I don't think this guy is used to getting hit with damage that actually applies to him like this or in this amount. So I'm actually overwhelming his armor repper. Let me look at the fit real quick. With nanite and with heat, he can tank 114, 102 DPS. My Hookbill is pushing out, I think, maybe 140, 180, hold on. 170. So I'm doing, I'm chunking him, and because the Dramiels try to sig tank and speed tank, they don't have a lot of buffer. So I'm chunking through his buffer that he's trying to top off. Um, and I decide that it looks like I'm gonna break him here. So I actually just let myself start bleeding structure because he's not gonna surprise me with any extra burst. So I start bleeding structure, and eventually I decide I'm just gonna start using the rest of my Ansil boosts. But I managed to take him down. So I'm gonna circle back and I'll let that fight play out once more, uh, just without any breaks or pauses. So I slide the gate. I check to see what ranges they're at. The kiting ship I want to go for just passed right by me, and for some reason he also starts reapproaching me. I think he just hits orbit here, and that's why he cuts back in my direction. So I start burning at him, tried to dual web him, almost got within 13 kilometers for the heated webs, but I heat my prop to catch him. Uh, I manage to catch him with the dual webs. I catch him with the scram. I start hitting with rockets. I actually could have started firing at him earlier because the rockets have a longer range. But I use my shield booster to top me off. During the initial bit of the fight, I stopped using the shield booster to top me off and switched to the armor repper due to the lack of insane burst. Slicer goes down, start going for the Dramiel, um, and now it's just a simple 1v1. So the Hookbill applies, I think it was 100, maybe 160 DPS to an afterburning Dramiel that's dual webbed with the faction rockets heated or cold. No, heated, something like that. With rage, it's a lot lower, but I think that I might have still been able to do this if I was using rage. It just would have been a lot closer, but I still have a fair amount of buffer in that, in the hook bill, in the uh, hole here. So that was my hooked bill versus versus a slicer and a Dramiel, and it was a fun fight. I'm glad that they stuck around to let me fight them. I hope that they did think that they could kill me. They could have maybe if they had. I think if the Dramiel had been at the warp in and caught me instead of me being able to catch the slicer, with both of them applying full DPS, it would have been it would have been a lot more challenging for me to kill them both without dying. The fight against the Dramiel probably would have gone the same. It would have been short, but then I would have been very low, and uh, it would have been a bit of a chase to get me to catch the slicer at that point too, all while he's hitting me with his lasers. So it would have been a tough fight, but they happened to be split, and that made the fight a lot easier. So hopefully you enjoyed the fight. Hopefully you learned something. Have a good one.